Okay, this is the Brown Duke Gun Show. My name is JP. I'm here today with Brandon. We are the official podcast for Sentry Defense Indoor Range in Youngsville, Louisiana. Please come visit us at Sentry Defense for all of your shooting needs. Today, round 4, we are going to try to talk about red dots. We've had technical difficulties over the past month trying to get this show out of the can, but hopefully we've got everything squared away today. So let's talk about red dots. Let's they're becoming very, very popular, on not just rifles, but also on pistols, for duty guns, carry pistols. We've had them in competition for a long time, but over the past, 5 years now, we've seen them really take off and be a staple on duty guns and carry pistols. So I guess we can start off and just get your opinions of what's selling, what are the popular ones that you're seeing come through the shop, and then we can go from there.
Yeah. So thankfully, I've been playing around with red dots for quite a while, and had some departments and things like that reached out and kind of helped them get more situated with red dots because they're becoming very popular. And there's a ton of benefits for it. But the ones that we see most popular sell, we sell a lot of Holosuns optics. We sell a lot of Triticon optics, a lot of SIG optics. The SIG, like Romeo 5s and stuff on rifles are great. We use a bunch of those closed emitter ones. And on handguns, we sell a lot of the Holosun EPS red dots.
Okay.
The new ones, the EPS ones, are they're a closed emitter optic, which means there's a piece of glass in the front and the back of the emitter. So it's an enclosed emitter. It stops anything from not letting the emitter project in the glass, right? So like mud, water, things like that. So they're great for duty use, great for concealed carry use. And they also keep the glass a lot cleaner. So like with lint and things like that, whenever you're having the gun inside your holster, it doesn't have lint that builds up inside that bowl like on an open emitter optic.
Right. Okay. Well, that makes sense. I haven't played around with the closed emitters that much, though. A couple of times ago when we were recording, you had them in the shop and I looked at them and they're pretty good. You don't really notice a lot of aberration or any sort of distortion in them.
They're very, very small. Obviously, the more pieces of glass you add in front of the eye, the more distortion you're going to have, the more parallax and things like that you're going to have.
Right.
But they're not too bad, especially red dots, since there's no magnification on it. It kind of helps out, right? Like you don't have to really start bending that glass or using different magnifications. There's just like a light coating to make sure the dot is projected and you can see the dot, but that's about it.
Yeah. Yep. So, and one thing I've noticed online, when you start to look about, people who are moving towards red dots, there's a lot of controversy, I guess, about, that's just another point of failure, another thing that could break, and another thing that you rely on. And there's also talk about using them in low light situations versus, in the daytime. And, from your experience, I guess, what do you think, what are you recommending to the customers now? I mean, because from my perspective, coming up from the competition world, red dot reliability has gotten a lot better.
Yes, 100%.
And it's something now that, probably when I started shooting red dots in 2014, I would have to change the battery for the dot every match or every 2 or 3 matches.
Seymours.
Just because, the Seymours, right? Because they would just eat batteries and you never knew if they were going to turn on, they'd lose 0. This was in 2014. Even going to 2016, the dots were very reliable, though they would eat a little bit more battery. And you get into a habit of changing them regularly. But really now, since 2019, with the dots that we've been using in competition, change them twice a year.
Yeah.
You don't have to. And I changed them just because more superstition than anything.
Yep.
But, for my carry guns that use the same Triticon optic, they last forever. And when I was using SIG optics, the batteries would last forever.
Yep.
So.
Yeah. I change out mine like once every year for competition guns because we turn off the dot like after the match, and so like if it's sitting inside the case, it's off the entire time.
Right.
So there's not that many hours that's on it. Usually those hours are like 30,000 to 50,000 hours on a 2032 battery, right? Usually red dots, that's where they last. So I'm not shooting that much hours in a year, right? So once a year is usually good enough. On a carry gun, I'll change it out more often because since I'm carrying that gun every day, every time that it stays on, right, the entire time. So every time I move, it's on. And that one I'll change out at least every 6 months, sometimes every 3 months on certain optics. So the new EPS ones are coming with a 1632 battery instead of a 2032, which is a lot smaller, so it doesn't have those many hours. So usually every 3 months or so, I'll change it out just to make sure.
Okay.
Went 6 months on it, but like I was trying to see how long it would go, and like right at 6 months it died.
Okay.
So I was like, all right, don't want to push it that close, you know?
Sure.
So I just changed every 3 months.
Okay, so the smaller ones that's not a 2032 battery, then you're changing every 3 months.
Yeah, on a carry gun.
That's fair.
And for reliability, like, I mean, it's lithium batteries now that we're using. I definitely highly suggest Energizer lithium batteries. Don't use anything else. Don't use Duracell, or even though like they're good batteries, but lithium Energizer is by far the best ones I've tried.
Right.
And if you have an optic that comes from the factory, the battery that's inside the box, I would throw that one away because like those big companies, they have, you know, this big, huge box of batteries. And whenever it starts getting low, they just add more batteries to the top of it, right? So you might get a battery that's been in there for a very long time. So I just buy a brand new Energizer battery. They're, you know, $4 or so we sell them for. And it's just cheap insurance, right?
Sure.
But a lithium battery will last, shelf life is 10 years.
Okay.
Right. So that's another thing people talk about. Like, I'm not switching over to red dots because like apocalypse or whatever, we can't find batteries. It's like, it's a 10-year shelf life. Buy enough batteries for 10 years and it's 10 batteries, right? And then like you're good. If we go past 10 years, then we have other issues. Like, you know, we have more problems.
Yeah, the grid's completely falling apart.
Yeah,
for
so
sure.
Don't worry about that stuff. But yeah, I hear a lot of like reliability issues with battery-powered things can fail, or man-made things can fail. And iron sights can fail too. Like I've seen just as many iron sights fail as red dots fail.
Sure.
In today's age, like with reliability of dots, I think they're super reliable. I've seen fiber come out of front sights. Like you've seen that.
Yeah.
I've seen
Triticon die.
Yep.
Tritium.
Tritium. Yep.
Yeah.
Tritium dies out after 10 years. That's another thing. So like if you're an apocalypse guy, like your tritium's going to die out too.
Right.
I've seen front sights fall off the guns.
The front sight or the rear sights. I've seen rear sights come off the adjustable ones. They'll just, you know,
snap
one ear of it'll come off, and I was like, well, that's useless.
Yep. Like I've broken a bunch of dots last year or the year before. Had an issue with like metal guns and stuff, trying to work through some dots and trying to figure out what worked. But also, like me and Blake practice a lot, and you know how rough he is on guns. Like he's famous for like cracking grips on 2011s and things.
Right.
Like he's cracked at least 5 or 6 sights 1 year.
Iron sights. And he's an iron sight shooter.
Yeah, iron sights. You know, rear sights cracking on the gun. He is shooting 40 caliber, so it's a lot more violent of a gun. But yeah, those I forgot it. It's Bowmore sights.
Right.
You know, the adjustable ones. Yeah, he'll crack them. Front sights will drift off or snap. You know,
or the turn. Do you ever see where they turn a little bit?
Yep.
And they get super wide. Yeah.
It's just so I've seen all those things happen. The other day we had a SIG sight, iron sight, where the inside tritium just like flew out of the gun. So like the whole entire like green fiber thing or the thing that holds the tritium just came out the gun. You know. So like it does happen. It's not anybody's fault. It's not SIG's fault. It's not any other company's fault.
Right.
It's just going to happen. Anything man-made is going to fail. So I don't think that iron sights are more reliable. I think they're both equally reliable.
Sure.
I think that the benefits of red dots are huge, and I definitely think they're much more beneficial than iron sights are, especially in low light because it's a battery-powered optic. So now you get to control that brightness, and you don't have to worry about like, hey, can I see my sights? Can I not see my sights? Is the target illuminated or not? Like I can adjust that, you know. So it is a whole lot better for that. And then the other great thing for self-defense is always staying target focused, just like that's the main reason for red dots. But like working around barricades and things like that, you don't have to work around that barricade with your guns up and making sure your sights are aligned. Find a target, then switch back to iron sights and make sure you're clearing the barricade. It's like as long as the dot's clearing it and I'm on target, I can press the trigger. Right. So I don't have to reconfirm that over and over again.
Correct. Yeah. No, that makes sense. So you glazed over this one point, but I think it's really important. In low light situations, you know, whether you're using iron sights or a dot, the light that you have on the firearm, number one, you should have a light on your firearm, particularly in a home defense situation.
Correct.
And you know, it should be configured in a way that makes it most useful to light up, to illuminate your sight picture, right? So that you can see, even if you're using iron sights, I think it's easier with a dot, right? In a low light situation because it's actually illuminated. But even if you're using iron sights, that light is going to help you see your sights.
Right? And so how you do that is because people they kind of like adjust the red dot and they're like, hey, it looks good right now. But then they might go into bright sunlight and then it like dies off. Right. Or if they're in low light condition, it might seem very bright, but the second they hit white light, it washes the dot away, right? So how do you adjust for that is get your carry gun, find a white wall that's inside your house, walk up there with your flashlight, hold your gun out, hit your flashlight, and if your dot washes away, you need to up the brightness.
Right.
So keep your white light on against the white wall, point the gun at the white wall, and then up your brightness until you can see your red dot. Sure. Once you see your red dot, then that's how it stays forever, right? That's the brightness I would keep it at. That way, if you're inside, you do hit your white light and you'll be able to see the red dot. If you're in low light conditions, yes, it's probably going to be like super blooming and, just a big blob of red, but at least you can still make shots.
Yeah.
The other way, if it washes out, you can't make shots, right? You don't know where your dot's at. So definitely brighter is a little bit better.
It's better to err on the side of brightness.
In self-defense, right?
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
In competition use, we always say like point it to the target and then you want to go as bright as you possibly can right before it blooms. So go to where it blooms and it has like a starburst effect and go down one. Right. And then that's what should be your brightness.
Right. Yeah. And for me, I like to have it, in a competition setting, I like to have it generally, on the dim side, right? So I may even go 2 steps down below that just because what I've noticed is that, and we can talk about this in a second, but when you'll naturally try to bring your eyes back to whatever's the thing that grabs the most attention, right? And so if your dot's too bright in competition, you'll stare at it, right? Yeah. And it's a constant thing, right? And so that's one thing with red dots that anybody who's moving to that platform has to train out, right? Is getting rid of that front sight focus in a sense, because to use the dots correctly, you really need to be target focused.
Yeah. And sometimes I see what you're saying. I've never thought about it that way, but yeah, it makes complete sense. Another reason why, like sometimes a little bit less, a lot of times it'll give me more patience. Mm-hmm. So like I'll see the red dot if it's very bright. I'll see it in my peripheral visions if I'm like target focused very on one specific spot on the target. Right. I'll see it start coming in, and instead of letting the dot settle, I'll kind of press the trigger a little bit sooner. Right. So I'll get that Charlie or almost on the Delta line. Yeah. So sometimes I'll notice like if I'm not super in tune with the gun yet, like right before a match, like in practice, I'll go down on the brightness setting a little bit more just to make sure I have more sight patience and I'm making sure the dot's actually in the part that I want to, and I'm like super focused on that. Yeah. So when I'm wheeling up for the season with regard to competition, I'll actually do the dot occlusion, right? So I have that dot cap that I use, and for a few practices, I'll go through and make sure that and I'll practice with that, just because it's like, okay, let me just make sure I'm 100% target focused and whatever. And it's usually when I'm going through the fundamental stuff that you go through, right? So I like to do a lot of doubles. I like to do a lot of the Frank Garcia dot drill when I'm kind of just trying to get reacquainted with the gun. And I find that if I'm occluding the dot at that same time, then it's really making me drive that fundamental of target focus. So, and then whenever things start to get more complicated, whenever we're doing transitions or doing stage work, then I'll take it off, because that's more match, that's similar to what we do in matches, right? Yeah. So I want to have a similar picture to what we see in matches and stuff like that. But that does bring up kind of a point that I want to talk about. When you are training up, if you're not very familiar with the red dot system, one of the things that you can do is occlude the dot. I don't recommend it forever, right? And some people do, and that's fine. But for me, I would say, at least once or twice a year if you're practicing regularly. And more so if you're brand new to the dot and you've shot a lot of iron sights before, it's a good exercise to cover the dot with painter's tape or masking tape, something that's going to come off, and shoot at the targets, right? And push the target out to, what do you say, about 10 yards or so? Yeah. Small target, maybe a paster size or 1 inch square target, push it out to about 10 yards and, try to hit that target. And what's going to happen is that if you're correctly target focused, you're going to see the dot overlaid on that target. Okay. And you're going to see, if you're using blue painter tape, you're going to see in your peripheral vision a little bit of blue, but it's like a blue haze, but you're otherwise going to see that dot on the target. You're going to see them together, right? If you're staring
At the site, which is what you're not supposed to do, you will see all blue, a red dot, and you will not see the target at all. So I think it's a good diagnostic tool for people to use as they're getting acquainted with, red dots, or as you're training up for something, just to make sure to confirm that you're actually target focused.
Yeah, definitely. And while you're doing that, don't worry really where the hits are going,
right?
Because it will like cause parallax, so you're not going to be like sighted in whenever you do that, right? So like if you're shooting 2 inches to the right or 2 inches to the left or so, and it's because your dot's occluded. So don't change your zero. Like don't zero your gun to that.
Right.
Just like say, hey, that's okay. Like I'm just trying to focus on where my eyes are going to be.
Right.
That's a lot of people make those mistakes in shooting. I think they try to focus on everything at one time instead of being like, hey, these 50 rounds, all I'm going to do is work on trigger control, or all I'm going to do is work on sight picture, or what my eyes are seeing. They want to practice all of it in 50 rounds. It's like, no, you can't get there. Right. So just worry about like, hey, I'm going to stay target focused this entire time. I don't really care where my hits are going.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I usually don't occlude the dot. I'll do it for students. Like I'll put tape on theirs, especially if they have a lot of iron sight shooting. But like the other day, I finally started practicing again because we have Texas Open coming up. And what I noticed like was, hey, I'm gonna make sure that I'm target focused, and I did wide transitions to make sure my eyes are moving first, and then making sure the dots come into play rather than like staring through the glass and trying to make that transition. So the wider the transitions, that helps. And then in dry fire, definitely push the target out to distance, because a lot of people will practice like in a room of their house, and they're only like maybe 5 feet away from the wall. So whenever they do that, their focus from the wall to the dot is like only 5 feet. So it's not that much of a distance. And you can kind of see both of them in focus, right? Like that's how your eyes work. But the second that you put that wall at maybe 10 yards, and then now you have your gun that is, a couple feet away from your face, they're both not in focus for sure, right? Like you have to change focus. So you can instantly see like, hey, am I looking at the dot or am I looking at the wall? Which one's in focus? So try to stretch it out a little bit more and put your transitions definitely farther than what you can see in the glass. Right? You don't want to put them right next to each other to where you just stay in the glass the whole time. That's going to kind of get you mentally in the mood for just staying sight focused instead of target focused.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I think, and that's a good dry fire drill probably for competitors for sure. And then also really more advanced non-competitors when they're doing dry fire. Of course, make sure you have no ammo in the gun, right? And you're practicing transitions at home or wherever you're dry firing. Make sure there's no rounds in the gun.
In a different room.
Ammo in a different room, the whole thing, right? But, the sequence should be eyes, head, gun, right? And the beauty of the red dot is such a good diagnostic tool, because if you look somewhere and the dot's already there, then you know that it's like, okay, well, my eyes were late, right? What you should see is that you find the target with your eyes, and then soon after you see this dot kind of coming into the target, right? Now, sometimes it'll overshoot and you'll have to come back. Sometimes it won't make it far enough. Sometimes it's coming low, sometimes it's coming high. But the point is, you want to move your eyes fast enough that it gets to the target before your gun gets to the target.
And that's kind of like what I was talking about whenever the brightness part is, I kind of dim it down to where I see it in my peripheral vision coming in, right? A little bit, and I want to wait to get to that exact point on the target. So I'm really focused on a specific spot on target, and then I see the dot coming in.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah. So no, I think that's a really good drill for people to practice just left and right, and different distances, like you say, put one real close and one real far, because the distance change up is a real headache with dots. And especially when you're coming close, you either have a tendency to not look for a dot at all, which, depending on how close it is, it may or may not be appropriate, but in practice, you still want to see the dot. You want to see some sort of red, right? Or you may turret and you might follow the dot with you. And if you're watching the dot make it all the way there, or especially when you're transitioning far, you're watching the dot as you're moving, well, that's the wrong thing too, right? Because that's going to be super slow.
Right.
Yeah. So, okay. So that's a really good high overview of red dots. I think, one thing we didn't get into are the pistols that, if we're talking about pistols, right? Rifles is easy. There are mounts, there are all kinds of mounts to mount red dots on rifles, right? But as far as pistols go, more often than not now, pistols are coming red dot ready, right?
And I would highly suggest getting a pistol with red dot mounting system. Even if you hate red dots and like you're one of these guys that's like, hey, I'm never going to use a red dot. It's going to take me too long to learn, or whatever it might be, whatever your excuse is.
Yeah.
But I'd still recommend getting one because now you can resell that pistol, right?
Sure.
Like no one is buying pistols that don't have red dot cutouts on them. So even if they're used, you can't sell them. Like they just use them as like truck guns or like, backup guns or, hey, someone needs a gun, here's a gun, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
But it's very hard to get rid of those. So I definitely spend the extra little bit of money. It's usually $50 to $100 more for the gun. And you get a optic system for that.
Yeah.
Some guns that are very popular, you can get them machined, which is ideally the best route to go. We send a lot of stuff to Primary Machine. They're the best ones that we've seen. They actually cut it for the red dot that you send to them.
Right.
So they're super tight fit. And I actually have a video somewhere where like I unscrewed the 2 screws on the Trijicon and turned the slide upside down. It wouldn't fall off.
Yeah.
Like, the dot was like that tight on it.
Right.
So they do great work. And I really like whenever it's machined for that because there's no gap in between. It usually keeps the red dot lasting a little bit longer. But if you don't have a gun that's very popular, you can't get it machined, right? Because they have to do a whole program just to machine your gun. They're not going to do that.
Right.
So try to find one that has a red dot optic system. And most of them are coming now with that.
Yeah. Now, do they mostly have multi-pattern mounting? Like, meaning, can they the ones that are coming out from the factory that are milled for dots, right? Are they giving out plates with those that are you can mount different footprints of dots?
Yeah. So usually the full size guns, you have different plates, and that's another reason why I kind of don't like I like it to machine for that because it's no plate system. So you have 2 screws holding on the optic, right? If you have a plate, now you have 4 screws. So now you got to rely on 4 different screws setting with Loctite and making sure that they're good, right? Which is more of a headache. It's more chances of a screw getting loose or not. But the bigger ones, it makes it easy if you're going to switch dots or a new dot comes out and you want to change it up. You can have all those plate systems and try different dots.
Sure.
Right. The smaller guns are usually coming cut for like a 407K footprint or 507K footprint or shield footprint. It's all the same footprint.
Right.
That's the optic that can fit on those guns because they're a lot narrower.
Okay.
Right. Other than that, you can get plates that cross it from that footprint to something different, but it's just a different plate.
But then you're adding a plate again.
Yep.
So that shield footprint, that's where you're seeing the Romeo Zeros and the
Holosun
EPS. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. 407K, 507K from Holosun.
Yeah.
That's all the same footprints.
Okay. Cool. One last thing, it just came to my head. One last thing to watch out for if you are in the market for a red dot. All the brands, you can do all the research you want. There are a lot of great brands out there. Find one that allows you to change the battery without taking the dot off the gun.
Yes.
Right.
Absolutely. So the worst optic I think out there, for me, personal preference is the Trijicon Armor. And people die hard about it. That was my first red dot because that was the only one at the time.
Yeah.
But I remember taking that optic off every 6 months to change out the battery. And then I remember all the contact issues, from generation 1 of those, where the battery would push the little contact up and then it would start flickering and all that stuff. So you had to put electrical tape underneath there. It was a pain. So now get one with a battery tray or get one with a top loading battery where you can change out the battery and you don't have to unmount the dot. Because that's one of the biggest reliability issues is people don't mount the dot properly. They don't use Loctite properly. Don't let it set. So then if you do have to change out the battery every time and do that, now you have more reliability issues.
Right.
So yeah, definitely recommend that. And one other thing that I constantly hear people saying they need to learn iron sights before red dots. I'm a strong non-believer of that.
Right.
I think that you definitely should learn red dots before you learn iron sights. Right. And my little girl, she started shooting whenever she was 4 years old. She's 8 now. Yeah. So she's been shooting for a few years and she's just now learning iron sights.
Sure.
And the reason being is because you're taking one of the fundamentals away so you can focus on all the other ones.
Right.
Yeah. So it's just like driving a vehicle. Whenever you learn how to drive a vehicle, hopefully someone didn't just throw you in a standard and say, hey, figure it out. Right.
Yeah.
Hopefully they had you like sit on their lap and just learn how to steer the steering wheel, right? Like I learned on a tractor.
Yeah.
So I was in a field on a tractor. They let off the clutch, and all I had to do was just steer the steering wheel and see how that moved the wheels, right?
Yeah.
Once I learned that, then I added in the clutch.
Right.
Then I added in like the brake. Then I added in the gears and all the other stuff.
Yeah.
So just like driving a vehicle, I'd rather put someone in an automatic. They can figure it out, and then just add the gears to the standard part. So the same thing with the red dot. Let them learn the red dots where they learn trigger control, learning grip, learning how to load the gun, all the safety stuff. And then once they master all that, then it's like, hey, all we're going to do is add these iron sights, and you just have to line them up.
Yeah.
That's the only fundamental you have to learn after that, right?
Right.
So it's a whole lot easier to do that. If you have kids, please put them on a red dot first.
Yeah.
It's super easy. Quick story I had. So me and Blake went to like daddy-daughter type shooting range thing.
Yeah.
And he brought Juliana, brought Ellie, and we were having them on the rifles, and they both have red dots, same exact guns, have silencers and everything to where they don't have to wear hearing protection.
Right.
Having a ball. So Blake's like, hey, I want to get them involved into the handguns. So I had a little Ruger Mark IV, 22 light or whatever. So it didn't have a red dot on it at the time. And Blake picks it up, and Ellie's like, well, I want to shoot that gun. So he takes Ellie, and he's trying to show her how to use this gun. And she has the gun, and she's like moving it in and out by her head and stuff like this. And he finally says, no, you got to hold the gun out to where you can see the sights, So she's looking down there, and finally she gets fed up with him. And she looks at me, and she goes, Dad, I can't see the dot. So he loses it because he's an iron sight shooter, right? He's like, you didn't teach her how to use iron sights? I'm like, no. She doesn't need to learn how to use that yet. Like, she just needs to learn how to use a dot. So he got wrapped up all around that. But
that's amazing.
That's a funny story.
It.
Oh, yeah.
How many hours did he talk about that?
Oh, yeah. He's like, you got to learn, teach her how to use iron sights. I'm like, I will, but sooner or later, it's going to happen. It's just right now, it's a whole lot easier just to shoot her with dots.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. By the way, you totally outed us in the South here. Learning how to, putting kid in your lap, learning how to steer.
Yeah,
like they don't do that in the North, right?
no, none of that stuff.
Because there are going to be some people who are listening in the North that are like, I didn't learn how to drive till I was 16-year-old.
I went to driver's ed.
Whose lap am I going to sit in?
That's right. Yeah.
No, it's like because in the South you learn way earlier than that.
Oh yeah. Yep.
So
I remember my great grandmother. She had go to driving school after she was older and stuff. They had to tell her she had to go get a driver's license. Yeah.
Oh, really? She had to go driver's? Wow. No kidding.
It's like, well, why do I need that? But
amazing. Cool. Well, man, we got the Red Dot Show in the can. I think that's good. Yeah. If you guys have questions, ping us, comment, subscribe. And the other thing I'll mention is that we are going to try to move a lot of our social media stuff to Twitter because we've been having problems with Facebook and with Instagram kind of doing the throttling and stuff like that. So we are going to update on those platforms. TikTok also, I think we're going to do with the Sentry's TikTok. We're going to try to do those platforms as much as we can. But right now it seems that we're going to try to also migrate to a Twitter first type thing where, because it's just giving us more flexibility. Essentially, we're not getting throttled. We don't think we're getting throttled or shadow banned with those platforms where the other platforms, particularly with our Instagram show or our Instagram page for the show got suspended and stuff like that. So we've been having issues with that. Just want to let you guys know that, we'll put up our Twitter stuff when we have it and, follow us there.